I've heard you talk about tax allocation. I recently switched all of my index funds in my taxable brokerage to ETFs. Is this truly more tax efficient, or am I just counting pennies at this point? So how do you know when something like that is worth it?
Well, okay, let me answer your question slightly different. Not your specific question, but is there a positive impact to thinking through the tax considerations of my investments? Absolutely there is. You mentioned tax location as an example. Different types of accounts. You have your pre-tax accounts, you have your after-tax accounts, and you have your tax-free accounts. Well, because they're all taxed differently, when you move from like a generalized structure like a target retirement fund to a more specific asset allocation, you not only want to think about how you're allocating or spreading out your assets, you want to think about what types of accounts you're holding in those. Like you want your high growth assets inside of your Roth. You want your ordinary income type assets inside of your pre-tax accounts. And then you want your assets that either have capital appreciation component or qualified dividends or distributions inside of your after-tax account so that it's subject to favorable capital gains rate. So you want to think about what types of investments am I holding in which types of accounts. And even you want to think through, okay, am I using mutual funds, and am I using an active mutual fund where there is literally a trader on the other side of the fund who's buying and selling and trying to outperform his specific index and generating a bunch of taxable transactions that ultimately get passed through to the end shareholder, or do I want to use something more efficient? Now, it's interesting in JB's question, Brian. I said, hey, I sold all of my index mutual funds and I bought ETFs. And while there may be some tax efficiency garnered there, I think of those as almost synonymous, because really good passive index funds should be tax efficient in and of themselves already without having to go to an ETF structure.
All index funds, whether we're talking about mutual funds or ETFs, are pretty tax efficient for exactly the reason Bo said. They don't have a lot of turnover, because think about it, indexes they drop like 3 or 4 stocks a year, and then they add 3 or 4. So it's just not a lot of turnover, meaning trades aren't being placed. That's why they're so efficient. Mm-hmm. The primary income source is just those few trades, as well as any dividends that are paid on the portfolio. Now, ETFs versus mutual funds is more of a timing tool, meaning that if I was buying in the late third, early fourth quarter, I'm probably buying the ETF because you won't have a capital gain distribution from the earlier trades in the year that have built up within the mutual fund. So it's more of a timing of when you're buying your investment. So JB, you asked, am I kind of splitting hairs here? I think for like a dollar cost averaging strategy, like if I was doing a monthly investment, I use the mutual funds because they just are easier. Now, I know you can set up ETFs for that too, but most trading platforms and the big brokerages is easier to set up automatic investments with the mutual funds. So that's what I've always kind of stuck with. You are confusing tax efficiency versus tax location, though. And that's what I do want to make sure we spend a little time, because tax location, when you use the word tax, they're, even though they're connected, they are separate planning elements, because tax location is exactly what Bo was talking about, is that you're going to want the tax policy to tie into the location of the investments. And when you start out, your savings rate is so much more important than even the investment. That's why we recommend like index target retirement funds, where you only choose how much you can save and when you need it. But once your assets start reaching multiple 6 figures, you're going to really want to start paying attention to where these assets are located, because, as Bo said, the growth stuff, put in Roth. We want to stick it to the man legally as much as possible to get that tax-free growth and that compounding working for you. Your pre-tax assets, you want to everything in that category. You kind of want to, if it's treated as ordinary income, that's what you put in there. So it's usually a lot of your conservative holdings, your bonds, some of your alternative strategies, those type of things will go in that category. When you look over at your after-tax, now we're looking at our dividends, things that can have capital gains, even some real estate holdings and other things. You want to put those in your after-tax because they just have some lower tax rates with the long-term capital gains or the qualified dividends, that you just want to maximize the tax efficiency of those things. So that's why tax location creates more tax efficiency, but tax efficiency of how index funds operate different than mutual funds is kind of a different thing altogether. But hopefully that gives JB some details there. And I often caution financial meetings, don't fall into the hassle factor trap of, you're splitting hairs, doing things. Make sure the actions you're doing is not getting busy doing nothing. Just because you're creating activity doesn't necessarily mean it's fruitful.
That's great.